Hello everyone, I hope you're having a wonderful day. Today, we're going to dive into a heartfelt story about Diep, a man working hard to build a new home, and Huyen, the woman standing by his side with her little daughter, Maya. Together, they face struggles from the past, the weight of unfinished relationships, and the challenges of starting over, but also find moments of warmth, laughter, and hope in their simple daily life. If you enjoy this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you won't miss the next videos. Diep walked into the yard with a ladder balanced on his shoulder, his steps steady despite the weight. Huyen, tying a bundle of bamboo nearby, glanced up and asked if he had borrowed it. He nodded, explaining that it came from Mr. Hoa at the head of the street, since their tall columns needed extra height. Leaning the ladder against the unfinished frame, he remarked that the work would move faster this way. The morning sun slanted through the trees, dust catching on his shirt, while faint hammering echoed across the quiet village. Across the yard, Maya's bright little voice rang out as she called the family dog. "Bibi, come play with me," she shouted, waving her arms. Diep chuckled, reminding her the yard was big enough for the dog to run around, while Huyen explained Bibi was already inside. Maya, full of curiosity, tilted her head and asked what Diep was doing. Crouching with his drill, he told her he was making holes. Moments later, she turned back to Huyen, still asking about the dog. Patiently, Huyen told her Bibi was safe indoors and asked her to fetch the lighter. The child skipped off happily with a chirpy, "Yes, Mommy dear." Diep paused to wipe his brow, then pulled out his phone to guide a friend who was on the way. Calm but precise, he explained the route. Follow the riverside road, past the hill's foot. Look for the bamboo house on the right. Hanging up, he told Huyen that the man he invited yesterday would be arriving to lend a hand. She smiled, saying she would take the chance to go to the market and prepare food so they could share a meal together. Maya immediately asked if she could go too. Before leaving, Huyen sighed at the sight of the garden, now wild with weeds, and the jackfruit tree that had yet to fruit. But finishing the house came first. She told Diep. When she asked if he needed anything, he replied that he already had screws and could reuse the old nails. As for food, anything would do, since his friend was easygoing. She reminded him to be careful, then walked down the path to the market. Left behind, Maya scolded the barking Bibi, while Diep turned back to inspect the bamboo pile. Soon, a voice called his name. His friend arrived, a little weary from the long walk, admitting he had to ask for directions before finding the place. Diep quickly offered a stool in the shade, and the two men began to talk. The friend asked why Diep was building here instead of repairing his old home. Diep explained that termites had ruined the old house and that this land belonged to Huyen, his girlfriend, who wanted a safe place for herself and her daughter. The friend looked around, remarking on the quiet charm of the place and admiring the jackfruit tree. But then his tone shifted. He asked about Tieu, Diep's estranged wife. Diep's expression darkened as he admitted she had recently shown up, asking for divorce and property division, though she came when he wasn't home, so nothing had been settled. His friend advised him to resolve matters quickly and cleanly. Diep nodded, confessing that the new house was for Huyen, whom he had been with for a year, and planned to marry once the divorce was finalized. His friend sighed, admitting he hoped Day would find someone truly right for him. Dee brushed it off with a pat on his shoulder, urging they get back to work before daylight slipped away. Together, they lifted beams, drilled holes, and set poles into place. Maya tried to join in, but Day gently told her to play in the shade instead. Meanwhile, Huyen reached the market. On her way, she had stopped to gather fresh ferns by the roadside, thinking they would make a good dish and save money until she could plant her own vegetables. She smiled at the thought of stir-frying them with garlic. Simple but delicious. Back at the site, Dee and his friend spoke of hardships. His friend lamented how floods had destroyed rice crops that year, leaving farmers without harvest. He mentioned that a man nearby was hiring laborers for pond embankments and asked if Dee was interested. Dee said perhaps after finishing the house. Together, they raised a heavy bamboo pole, securing it in place before sitting down for water. When his friend asked where Huyen was, Dee explained she had gone to buy food to welcome him. The man said meals weren't important, helping each other was. Noticing Maya, he asked whose child she was. Dee explained warmly that she was Huyen's daughter, abandoned by her father until he took them in. His friend chuckled, saying Dee had gained both mother and daughter, and remarked on her cuteness, assuming her mother must be beautiful too. At the market, Huyen paused at a poultry stall, but turned away when chicken proved too expensive. Later, she returned home, where Day proudly introduced her to his friend. The man greeted her kindly, saying he had heard about her goodness. Huyen welcomed him, invited him to dinner, and teased the men for working so quickly. Day credited his friend's help, and Huyen left to prepare the meal. As they worked again, Dee's friend whispered that Huyen was a good match, recalling he once saw her wandering with Maya after being mistreated by her ex-husband. Day agreed, saying their shared struggles had drawn them together. They turned back to lifting the final beam, determined to finish before sundown. In the kitchen, Huyen's voice mingled with Maya's laughter as the girl insisted on helping despite her fatigue. Soon Maya ran to Dee, asking him to measure her height. He told her she was 90 centimeters. She pouted at being short, but he encouraged her to eat well and grow. She nodded seriously, promising to try. A fragrant smell drifted from the fire as Huyen stir-fried the ferns with garlic. Day, catching the aroma, asked what she was cooking. She smiled, saying she had picked them earlier, knowing he liked them. He grinned, declaring it perfect. She promised to cook plenty, and he suggested they all eat together once the work was done. The simple warmth of labor, food, and companionship lingered in the unfinished house, wrapping it in a sense of home that walls and roof alone could not yet provide. Dee adjusted a beam carefully, muscles straining as he called to Hugh to lift the far end. The unfinished frame creaked slightly under their effort, the sound echoing through the quiet countryside. From the kitchen, Maya's lively voice drifted out, asking her mother what smelled so good. Huyen teased her daughter, asking if she was already hungry. Maya laughed, promising to wait until mealtime, but offered to help set bowls instead. Her small footsteps pattered as she skipped away, cheerful as always. Soon, Huyen called that it was late and urged the men to come eat. Dee wiped his brow, glanced at Tieu, and asked if he was hungry. Hugh admitted he was starving, making De green, and tell him to wash his hands since food was ready. At the doorway, Maya complained that BB was still running around even though it was dinner time. De helped her carry rice to the table, guiding her gently. Together, they gathered at a low table, a simple meal spread before them. The warmth of family filled the space, contrasting with the day's heavy work. Hugh looked around and said the frame might be nearly done, but honestly, just seeing them together like this felt like true happiness. Huyen modestly urged him to try her food and see if it tasted good. He laughed, saying it already looked delicious. When he took a bite, he praised her skill, saying dough was lucky. Day quietly added that family meals like this were happiness enough. Joking, Hugh said he might visit often just to eat, and Day told him he would always be welcome. During the meal, Huyen placed fish on Maya's plate, warning her to watch for bones. The child asked her to pick them out, which she did patiently. From the corner, BB barked, wagging his tail until Dee tossed him a scrap. Maya giggled, remarking how well BB ate. Between bites, Day told Hugh that tomorrow they would begin the roof and promised to call for help. Hugh nodded easily. Huyen reminded Maya to sit properly, and the little girl obeyed with a quick, "Yes, Mom." The dishes disappeared quickly, but Huyen kept refilling bowls, insisting no one should go hungry in her house. By the time they finished, night had fallen. Outside, cicadas buzzed.
Khi hoàng hôn
Day
buông
is
xuống,
determined to
Đệ
start
và
fresh,
Adam bước qua khu
building a
rừng
home
sương
on
mờ
Huyen's land,
dưới những cơn
where
phùn
she
mưa
and
nhẹ,
her little
đuổi
daughter
theo một
Maya
bóng dáng
can
bí ẩn
finally
trông
feel
giống
safe.
Huyền.
With the help of
Dù
his
họ
loyal
tuyệt vọng
friend
đuổi
Hugh,
theo qua cơn
he
mưa
works
đầy,
tirelessly under the sun,
cô ấy biến mất vào trong
balancing
bóng tối,
beams,
để lại trong Đệ
securing
một
poles,
nỗi đau nhón
and
xen
dreaming
lẫn
of a
hy vọng
future
và nghi
free from
ngờ.
the ruins of his old
Sau
life.
đó họ tìm thấy cô, một
Huyen
cô gái
supports
trẻ
them with
ốm yếu
quiet
và
strength,
bất tỉnh bên rìa rừng.
preparing meals from what
Nhưng
little
cô ấy
she
không
can
phải
gather,
Huyền.
while Maya
Mọi người
fills the
đưa cô ấy
unfinished
đến nơi
house
an
with
toàn,
innocent
trong
laughter.
khi tâm trí
Yet
Đệ vẫn ám
shadows
ảnh
linger.
bởi hình ảnh
Dee's
thoáng qua
estranged
và người
wife,
phụ nữ
Tieu,
mà
has
anh nghĩ là
reappeared,
Huyền.
demanding divorce
Sáng hôm
and
sau,
property division.
Tử Vi tỉnh dậy
As
trong một
night
căn
falls
phòng xa
in the
lạ và
half-built
cảm thấy
frame,
bất an,
the warmth
nhưng
of
bị
family
cuốn hút
grows
bởi sự
stronger,
điềm tĩnh của Đệ.
but so does the
Trong khi
tension
Adam
of
xuất hiện,
unresolved
một buồng không
ties.
khí căng thẳng lặng lẽ bao
Can Dee
trùm,
truly
gợi lên
close the
những mối
painful
liên hệ
chapter of
tiềm
his
ẩn
past
và
and
quá khứ
protect the
chung.
fragile
Cùng
happiness
nhau,
he's
họ đứng
building
trước ngưỡng
with
của một câu
Huyen
chuyện
and
đầy
Maya?
những câu hỏi chưa lời giải
The
đáp,
answer
hy
lies
vọng
just
và lời
ahead.
hứa.